just like Republicans in Arizona, Wisconsin's Republican-controlled legislature has decided they're going to spend an undisclosed amount of taxpayer funds to entertain President Trump's fantasies about some kind of election fraud that will explain why Joe Biden's in the White House, even though it really should be Donald Trump. In Wisconsin, though, the way they've decided to go about doing it is weirder than anything we've seen in other states so far. According to reporting from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, the Republican Speaker of the Wisconsin Assembly has hired 3 former police officers to carry out an investigation to, quote, investigate aspects of the November election. Quote, Assembly Speaker Voss said he was giving the investigators a broad mandate to spend about 3 months reviewing all tips and following up on the most credible ones. The officers have reportedly also been given subpoena power. Over the weekend, the Journal-Sentinel dug into the background of one of the 3 officers hired by the Republican speaker. His experience in investigating voter fraud includes him writing a bogus report on alleged voter fraud in the 2004 election that a federal judge later declared not trustworthy. According to the Journal-Sentinel, that officer used his own funds to pay for copying and binding some copies of his bogus report, which he then delivered himself to the heads of the state Democratic and Republican parties. His boss then banned him from visiting the polls on Election Day in 2008, after which he quit the police force to go work for a Texas-based Tea Party group that sends conservative partisan poll watchers to the polls on Election Day, and that has been accused of intimidating minority and Democratic voters. That's who Wisconsin Republicans have just given subpoena power to cast doubt on the presidential election results in Wisconsin, which I should note Joe Biden won by a not inconsiderable margin. Joining us now is Ben Wickler. He is the chairman of the Wisconsin Democratic Party. Mr. Wickler, it's nice to see you. Thanks very much for joining us tonight.
It's great to see you, Rachel.
Looking in from the outside, this feels both in keeping with what we've seen in other states, including Arizona, and it also feels weirder and smaller. Can you tell me whether or not that's an appropriate impression, or is there something else I should understand about it?
So I think you're right that it's weirder. It's very much in keeping with Wisconsin in 2021, but it's not smaller, because the difference between Wisconsin and the other states where Republicans are trying to trump up these sham investigations is that Wisconsin's been the tipping point in the last 2 presidential elections. And the other difference is that we do, as you said, have a Democratic governor, Tony Evers, who can actually veto Republican voter suppression bills. So this is about one thing. It's less about trying to relitigate 2020. It's more about trying to help Trump steal 2024. And if Republicans manage to build up this suspicion, and then if they win the governorship, they'll pass voter suppression bills to tilt the vote in 2024, which is why we're obsessed with reelecting Tony Evers in 2022 so that they can't carry out this dastardly plot.
The one thing that we've seen also, Ben, in Arizona is that this has become a huge fundraising juggernaut for Arizona Republicans. They are raising so much more money this year than they were this time last year. There was a great report about it today just in the Arizona Republic, that by creating this spectacle, whether or not they're only appealing to their hardcore partisans here, they've been able to attract basically Trump supporters' money from all over the country that's all going into the coffers of Republican activists and the Republican Party in the state as they make this into a cause celeb that may not have any, direct manifestation in terms of the election results, but it will cast aspersions on that create suspicions about the election result, and it will build up their party and their ability to compete in the next elections.
It's a grift for the GOP, but they're turning it into political power. And the important thing is that if you believe in democracy, if you believe that everyone should have a say in determining self-government in our country, you've got to support the folks that are fighting for democracy. In Wisconsin, that means going to wisstems.org or going to tonyevers.com, chipping in. We're hiring organizers literally right now. You can find the application page on our website to make sure that across the state, we're talking to voters about the fact they do have voting rights, that they can request absentee ballots. Republicans can't shut that down, as much smoke as they like to kick up. So we've got to get both feet on the gas pedal to drive forward and make sure our democracy actually works in 2022 so that it's not gone in 2024.